Yes, my question is mainly for Mr. Moisey, but I'm happy for anyone who would like to answer it. It deals with the idea of cultural relativism and economics, which is what he originally brought up. And I want to ask you, to what extent do you think other models, such as state capitalism or others, are a viable competitor to what we have in the West in terms of the way in which we are economically, socially, and politically organized? Thank you.
I think, answering as a man coming from the West, there was something wrong in our approach to others. We were looking at the others with arrogance, as if we had all the keys, that if their future, their ideal, was simply to become like us. And the moment we were looking at the other with arrogance, we were looking at us with complacency. In fact, we were preaching to others model which we were not practicing ourselves, to the point where the Chinese at the time of the big economic crisis that struck us, looked at us and said, but what are you talking about? What is this Western financial model? You are ruining yourself and maybe the world. And there is that Chinese joke that goes in Beijing. There are 3 dates that are fundamental to understand modern China. In 1949, communism saved China, Mao Zedong. In 1979, capitalism saved China. And in 2009, China saved capitalism. And somewhere we are at a turning point, which is that suddenly the Asians who were preaching us, who were telling us with some complacency too, that the next millennium, so we're going back to your calendar, will be Asian, that the millennium of Asia had just started, are themselves asking fundamental questions. But what I do really believe is that we have to start to learn from the other. I mean, there were moments, very brief moment in life, when civilizations at the level of elites met as equal. Think of the Jesuits discovering China in the 16th century or Japan in the early 17th century. Think of the Dominican discovering Latin America and, for the best of them, trying to learn from their culture. And so we've lost completely this understanding of the other based on much more modesty, because from the middle of the 18th century till yesterday, the world was totally dominated by the West. So what does it mean in terms of model to live in a post-Western world where the world is still, where the West is still very present, but it has to start to understand that the others are equal in their own ways and have to contribute something to us. And so that's in a way, that's the ambiguity of the problem we are facing. The Chinese are doing benchmarking. We should do benchmarking too, but not forgetting our own comparative advantages, which are in the realm of ideas and ideals.
Yes, please. Yeah, my name is General Njoroge, the ambassador of Kenya in Israel. And coming to this discussion about the question of morality and justice in shaping tomorrow. And I take tomorrow plus tomorrow is the future. And we look at bettering the tomorrow. And I assume we are talking about the human race. We are not talking about the people of Israel here. We are talking about the human race in the whole world. And I think I expected something like to better our future as the human race, in making it better. Should we jeopardize morality? How do we justify what we do to make the future better? And should what we do be for specific people or for the whole human race? As we use the scientific methods, the development that we already have to improve on tomorrow, what should we look at that is morally justified to be done that does not harm the rest of the human race in the whole world? If we could have a panelist address that question. Thank you very much.
Yuval, you want to address this? Yes.
I think that the basic issue which you touched upon is, again, who are we? When we speak about bettering the world for our sake, and when we speak about our moral obligations towards others, then the biggest issues which is coming back again and again in different questions is who are we talking about? And in my view, the relevant category is a bio-global category, the category of the entire human race. And again, the main boundaries are between those who fall outside the human race, which is animals on the one hand and potentially future species in the future. And I think that we are progressively going from the direction of thinking in terms of very specific groups, in terms of countries and nations and religions, into thinking more and more in biological terms. And I think also this is where feminism comes in, and why it is, I think, correctly viewed as the most important transformation of the 20th century, because it again places the biological issue, differences of sexuality, of sex, and of gender in the center of the stage, and not differences of culture or of countries or of religion. And I think this will only get, this will become more and more the main battlefield of the ethics, and the rest of the discussions will take second place at best.
We have Nina wants to, please.
Thank you. I actually think that in some ways your question was answered by Professor Moisey, actually, when he talked about transparency, because I think that's the crucial necessities, better laws and transparency. I also want to say that maybe, once again, the former Soviet in me really is very scared when people talk about the human race or humanity, because communism was trying to save humanity by killing every individual. So I think that when we talk about better laws and transparency, we should think not about how to save humanity or the race, but more how to benefit the individual. So how they, and talking, sort of using Professor Avishai's line that we really can become global only by going local, but going little to the little individual, so everybody would be protected. I think that's what should be our aspiration. And a little point to you, if I may, when you said that the 20th century, from 19th century, 20th century belonged to the West. Once again, as a former communist, would like to disagree. We really took part of that century. There was the space race and whatnot, and we're really winning in it for the right. Pardon me? Well, you know, we had Chinese, and then we of course swallowed all Eastern Europe. So that was, so we took over for some while. But I think, in agreement with you, I would say that because USSR really went complacent on its victory, and I think that collapse really should be a great cautionary tale for anybody who claims that they know the answers for the future.
Excuse me? סליחה, אפשר לשאול?
I think that,
I'm sorry.
I think that addressing your question about global justice and how to be concerned with the vulnerable populations in the world, the issue is whether a concerted effort should be done by the international community or the international community, namely the nation states, are irrelevant, and we are about to create new politics, cosmopolitics, some kind of governing bodies which will run the planet, or organizations that will be of a very different sort. My claim was we are still within the frame of an international community, and I believe it's the obligation of the international community to look after the vulnerable people and the vulnerable states and the vulnerable populations. And global justice is the right attitude. The point is what agencies will do it. I don't see the politics in cosmopolitics, but I still see the politics in international frame. And that's the two main divide now about global justice.
Let's take, we have time for one more question,
Okay,
so please let's take the last question.
I don't know who we are. I don't know. I know who I am. I'm an Israeli Jerusalemite mother of 3 children. My question is intended mainly to Professor Margalit, but I'd like to hear other answers, of course. We are here in Jerusalem. My father was the mayor of Jerusalem for 30 years. He believed coexistence, Teddy Kollek, he believed coexistence is possible between the different religions and different groups in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem should reflect on Israel and the rest of the world. I want to ask Professor Margalit and the others, do you see a possible solution for the conflict here, for the other problems mentioned of justice and so on that we see not practiced here today? I'm not talking about, I mean, who knows what tomorrow brings. So I, as an Israeli, as a mother who, I lost friends in wars, my friends lost their children in wars, and I don't want to lose any more people in unnecessary wars here. So do you see any practical solution at the present or the near future?
I'm glad that you added the hedge practical, because I see a solution, but most people disagree with me. And therefore it's impractical. And my practical suggestion is a very simple one. There is an Israeli consensus, and Israeli consensus is what all Israelis say in public and very few believe in private. I believe in private in 2-state solution, but seriously so. This is the position of the government, they don't believe in it. So as far as, if you ask me, do I see a solution, politically a viable solution now on the agenda? My answer is no. Do I have a solution? The answer is yes, very simple.
I just want to add maybe the last point about your question, and then we'll have to finish our session. I would say actually to Avishai that there are many people who believe that solution. I mean, I think in both sides there are around 60% of the people who believe in that, good-willing people. The only problem is that 80% of those 60% don't believe that there are 60% on the other side. And the issue is really how to establish what is fundamental to moving forward, a basic element of trust. So the good-willing majority, and I think still we have a good-willing majority, can seize control on the process. So we can get to a condition in which, and this follows to our first question, in which we will be unburdened, seriously, by the moral pain and creating conditions in which what you envision will be possible. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank my fellow panelists. I mean, there are so many questions that we have to.
We have one more question.
Sorry, could I
Sorry,
ask one more question?
I'll be delighted to go ahead. We can say,
Amazing.
הגיע הזמן קריאת שמע של שחרית, it's fine. I mean, just let's take the
Okay,
next
well, just going back to what Joel was speaking about a little bit earlier about artificial intelligence and the possibility, I thought it was quite an interesting subject about the possibility of having a synthetic form of human existence. And we know that we are going in that direction. We know that we can simulate a mind. We know that we can have mechanisms that use human neurons. My question is really, and I'd really love to hear your opinion, is what are we losing in that process? If there was a situation where we could create a different type of being, as you said, it would be a different species, it wouldn't even be a Homo sapien, what would we be compromising in that process? I am going a little bit on Nagel's philosophy about consciousness, and I'm touching a little bit on if we had to compromise something of our mortality, of our bodies, of our sensory experience, how much would we still have of our humanity? Would we still be able to, how much of ourselves would we still have? And I think we underestimate how amazing the human mind actually is. I mean, I think we can all agree that the human mind is probably one of the most complex things in the known universe. And how much would we be compromising in that process? Thank you.
So I'll try to answer briefly that we don't know. When we are going forward blindly, I think for me this question is not something for the far future. It's something burning. It's something that has to be addressed now. Because again, from my experience as an historian, I think most of the big revolutions of history happened without anybody realizing what is happening, without anybody planning ahead. I'm thinking mainly about the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago and the industrial revolution. They just happened. People were busy doing other things, fighting other wars, and they just went forward with many, many small decisions which accumulated to a tremendous revolution. And sometimes it works out well, sometimes it doesn't work out so well, and we are just like the sorcerer's apprentice. We know how to release immense powers of change. We have no control over them.
Okay, so this is the moment where we're going to have to stop the discussion, which can go on for long. I want to thank the audience for your patience and questions, and thanks our panel.